entering the room right now. Good to see you all. I'd love to see everybody in the chat, especially if you're new to class 4. Let us know where you're from. Or if you're not new to class 4, let us know. I'd love to know what about these classes, if you've been to the first 3, has been particularly helpful, or your favorite thing to learn. Just letting people in. Good to see you all. It's so fun to see the cameras on and see everybody in their houses in various places. Some people at work. I love it. Oh, Debbie's showing her work. That looks great, Debbie. And it looks like you did the video too. We got a little lantern there on the side. Oh, and I see Cynthia's as well. So good. Oh, and Cynthia, you did your own people. Well done. I love that. Leighton, look how fun this is. Let me pull up the gallery view. Leighton in your cute pink hoop. I love it. And Fatima. Oh, fun. It's so fun. Everybody, like to see everybody's. It's like, they look like mine. Which, like, of course, here's mine. Yay. I love it. So great. Oh, Jessica, that looks so good. Well, welcome, everybody. Oh, the Highlands of Kimberly. What was that? And Kimberly, too. Where's Kimberly? Oh, there's Kimberly's. Yes. Very cool. So cool. I love it. Now I'm just looking at the chats. We've got California, Florida, Fredericksburg, Highlands of Scotland caught my eye. I visited Scotland once in college with the jazz band I was in. We went on a tour of jazz festivals all around the UK. We went to Glasgow and Dundee and Aberdeen and Edinburgh, and I loved Edinburgh. Oh my heck. So I took my husband there when we got married. I was like, okay, have I got the place for you? We went and explored all around. Oh, Leighton's just up the road from me. Joan's in Alaska. Fatima's from Mexico. This is so cool. Boston, Mass. My whole family's from Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. So welcome from Boston. Hi from Georgia, Missouri, Australia, Canada. This is so great. All around the world. We're all working on the same project. I'll take a little unity wherever I can get it. So welcome. We've got everybody kind of settled and entered in the room. I'm just going to peek at my notes and make sure we cover everything before we get started. So for those of you who are watching now, who are maybe new, I've seen a lot of finished portraits held up to the camera. So I think most people have the pattern and supply list. But if you're watching this from the future during the replay, chat. I just put a bunch of links. Oh, check out the chat. I thought you meant I needed to open it. Okay. Spencer, my husband and helper, who's sitting right here, he put all the links in the chat. So stitchpeople.com/Michaels is where you can get the pattern and supply list. Michaels.com/classes, or Michael's YouTube channel is where you can catch the replays of classes 1, 2, and 3, and where you will be able to catch the replay of this class number 4 in 24 to 48 hours. And then we did some bonus videos between classes 1 and 2, between classes 2 and 3, and between classes 3 and 4. I made a total of 3 little stitch along bonus videos on Stitch People's YouTube channel. So if you do youtube.com/Stitch People, you can kind of see the in-between like little homework, because this pattern was a little big to tackle 100% in these live classes. So we had a little bit to practice and do in between so that we can work on things, goalpost style in class. I have loved seeing your works in progress and your finished works here in class and on social media. So please continue to post those. It's so fun to see it. So when you post to Instagram or Facebook, use the hashtag #MakeItWithMichaels, all one word, #StitchPeople, all one word, and #DMC. And that's the easiest way for us to find you, is with that little trifecta of hashtags. And I wish I could say go to whatever to sign up for next week's class. But so bittersweetly, this is the last of our series, and we will finish up our Sherlock Holmes pattern here today. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We are so excited to jump in. So I'm going to switch my view here to my work, and we're just going to jump right in. Why not? So this is as far as we have gotten, both from working together in class and from the stitch alongs kind of in between class. So if you watch the stitch along, I did do one of the lanterns already, but I'm going to do the other one just to review some ideas and some things that you can do to personalize or have a little more fun with, or think outside the box on any cross stitch patterns you make. So for those of you unfamiliar, I'm kind of the creator and primary designer with Stitch People. That's our cross stitch company. And we focus on cross stitch portraits, primarily do it yourself, totally personalized cross stitch family portraits. But occasionally we'll do patterns like this where it's, you know, portrait of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. So we believe, since every person and every family is totally unique, we are all about customization and personalization and making things your own. So if you feel inclined to turn a cross stitch into a straight stitch or a satin stitch, or pull out new techniques, or change the color of something, or even I noticed somebody's portrait today, it looks like they did a little self-portrait on either side of the door. So if anybody has visited 221B Baker Street, maybe on a vacation, you could put yourself in this little portrait and, you know, memorialize that. So so I always like to encourage you to just jump right in, trust your creative instincts. The whole point of any hobby, of cross stitching or anything else, is that it's personally fulfilling to you, and that it's something that brings you joy and that you have a fun time with, and that you feel is an expression of who you are. So let yourself, give yourself permission and let yourself feel like you can make things your own and change things where you'd like, because you are an innately creative individual who has every right to do so. So I'm going to stitch this second lantern. Oh, I'm gonna there we go, right above John Watson's head. And the reason I wanted to do this together is just to review these half stitches and to review the satin stitch that we learned last week, which I'm going to do in the center of the lantern. So I've got my 3 strands of DMC 310 black floss already loaded, locked and loaded and ready to go. And I'm just going to bring my needle up. I'll review what's called casting on. It's a way of starting your floss without any knots. So you leave a loose tail on the back of your fabric, hold it with your hand, and I'm going to just follow the pattern and make a straight horizontal stitch. And then I'm going to create the diagonal stitch in that same square. And as I create that, a loop will naturally form on the back side of my fabric, through which I can feed that little tail and secure it so it's not going to pull through, and that way I don't have to have any knots, which is really, really nice. It's helpful to keep things flat so that when you frame it or are working with it, it's not too chunky. So the middle stitch here is just a cross stitch. It fills the full square. And then the other side, I'm going to do the top horizontal stitch and the diagonal stitch. Now, often with half stitches, like we did in Watson's suit or Sherlock's suit or the hat, sometimes a diagonal, well, I guess the hat we did both stitches. Sometimes a diagonal is just the diagonal. And that's usually if there's 2 colors in the same square, at least as far as my pattern designs go. And sometimes it's you want to fill off the top of it by doing the horizontal stitch as well. In this case, because I have a horizontal stitch to the right and left of this cross stitch, I see a little visual dip in the center there. So I'm just going to creative license myself the permission I need, which is none but my own, to create 1 more horizontal stitch in the middle there so that I have more of a straight line going across this lantern. And I'm going to do the very same diagonal following the pattern here. Now, because a cross stitch sits directly below and to the side of this diagonal, I'm not going to give it the horizontal filler stitch, essentially. You'll see here as we move along the pattern. Oops, I came back in the same hole I just went through. My bad. Fix that right up. Okay, so as I do this cross stitch next to my diagonal, and then you'll see as I do the cross stitch below it, it fills in the space rather nicely, as opposed to these 2 diagonals that don't have stitches above it to fill in that white space. I think you'll see what I mean here. There we go. And then following the pattern even more. We'll just stitch that right up. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this second lantern today together was just, I kind of sped through it in the stitch along video, and I wanted to go over some of these diagonal techniques, because half stitches can sometimes be a little bit confusing. And I've explained it in videos past, but I always say it. While I did learn to cross stitch, you know, the overall concepts from my grandmother and my mom when I was a kid, the rest of it, I picked it back up in my 20s and kind of just taught myself what to do. So a lot of my designs are a little bit non-traditional because I design things the way that I think it should look. AIDA fabric or cross stitch, tradition be darned. So, so sometimes it's a little wacky and people are like, Lizzie, what are you doing? Which is why I just wanted to say, do it however you need to to make it work for you. So now I'm just going to follow this pattern and do horizontal stitches across the middle. And I'm just checking out my pattern. It looks like what I did on the left side lantern is I did horizontal stitches here on the outer edges, but not across the cross stitches in the middle because that's where the gray of the lantern and the flame kind of fill that in. So they don't really need to be filled out in that way. And now I'm going to take care of the bottom 3 stitches there. I'm just gonna look at my pattern. Need to go down 1, down 2 from there, down 1, down 2, and then that's just a diagonal and a cross stitch and another diagonal. Now what I'm going to do is take a break from using this black fabric, or I'm sorry, this black floss. What you could do is just leave it hanging and do the rest of your work and just thread it back up and come back, or you could tie it off. Because I know I'm asking for trouble if I just leave it hanging with 100 of you watching me live in real time, I'm going to just cut it and rethread and restart it when I need to, because I just know, those of you who've watched, I have been cursed with many little knots and funny little issues during these classes, so not going to tempt fate. Now I'm going to use DMC 645 for the inner part of the lantern. And it's funny, as I got to thinking about it, I was like, man, I really should have designed it with this, the glass color, the 926, the color that I used for the window, because the lantern would be glass as well, but oh well, missed opportunity. If you thought ahead and did that, yeah, you. That was astute and smart, but I'm going to just follow the pattern as much as possible for the sake of this class. But if I were doing it for myself, I would say, hey, past Lizzie, I don't like that choice you made. Current Lizzie's going to change it and do the glass color. I don't mind the gray though. It's very foggy London town. So this is just a handful of cross stitches. Once again, I'm going to pull my needle through, being careful not to pull the tail in. And I'll do my cross stitches. I'm going to leave the center open for the orange flame, flip over to the back of my portrait, see that loop that I'm making naturally just with the course of my stitching, and pull the floss through that loop. Ta-da. Go back the other direction. Thank you, Spencer. He's fixing the camera. He's always giving me notes like, scooch to the left, scooch to the right.
To the left, to the left.
Everything you own and about to the left. I
see you dancing, Elisa.
Gotta get my Beyonce on. Isn't it funny how, you know, just little phrases or whatever always make you think of certain things? Yes, sounds like we have a question.
Leighton had a question. She
Leighton
asked,
has a
we
question.
will be
Leighton
at
from Lehigh.
Pinners Conference this year.
Oh, good question. So sometimes we do conferences. We did do the Pinners Conference, I think back in 2018 in San Diego and in Salt Lake City. We will not be doing the Pinners Conference this year, unfortunately. It was a great time. Yeah, I think our, what we found is that Stitch People's just a little bit, it's almost like too DIY for the Pinners Conference. The Pinners Conference is for those of you who don't know, it's kind of a take on Pinterest. And it's just a lot of, it's basically a big craft fair, but with an emphasis on products and kits and things that you can like take and do, you know, Pinterest style, DIY, whatever. It's really, really fun, really cool. But a lot of it is a little bit more immediate gratification. And we found people would come over and want to like do Stitch People. And then we're like, oh, it's going to take, oh, I can't do it in an afternoon. Never mind. But maybe in the
That-
future.
That said, we are going to be doing more patterns like Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, like more one-off patterns. Yes, totally.
And that kind of stuff when we eventually sell in kits. I
Yep.
could see us going back to Pinterest favorites in the future
Yeah.
and highlighting those kinds of products.
Absolutely.
But not this year.
So what I've done while we've been talking about this conference is I got out my DMC 3776 and I just cut a small length of it because somebody called me on that in the last class and I paid attention. You're right. I don't need to use giant lengths of floss when I only am making like one stitch. So I just cut a little length and I just lick the ends of it because that's how I do, even though it's probably a bad habit. They say licking the ends of your floss is a bad habit because it can like rust the inside of your needle, inside the eye of the needle, or promote fraying the edges of your floss. But I say it's fast and effective. So the way this pattern is designed, I'm just going to show it to you, would be to cross stitch the flame stitch here in the middle and then call it a day. And I want to show that to you because it's a totally effective choice. And there's nothing wrong with it. The only reason I'm going to straight stitch it is for fun and for interest and because we learned a little bit about it in our last classes. And so I want to just show you how you can utilize different stitches. But hey, look, that is what the cross-stitched orange flame would look like. Totally great, totally effective. You could stop there. And if that's what you're comfortable with, do that. For Watson's mustache and for Sherlock Holmes's hair and sideburns, I did a series of straight stitches, which creates what's called a satin stitch. A satin stitch is basically just like side by side by side by side by side straight stitches that creates that like satiny embroidered effect. So what I'm going to do is just create some vertical straight stitches side by side by side. Thank you, Spencer. In the area where the flame goes. And this does require kind of poking the needle outside the holes of the AIDA fabric, which is one of the reasons I like to use an embroidery needle for cross stitching because I have that nice sharp point of my needle to help me go out of bounds because I'm a rebel. Isn't it funny? A very polite rebel gets their kicks going outside the lines of a cross stitch pattern. If you've got a little rebellious streak in you, boy, do I have the solution for you. Cross stitching.
You might even use a different color.
Right, for rebels everywhere. Using different thread counts, using different stitches, different colors. Go crazy, go wild. Have at it. All right, so I'm gonna hold this close to the camera, see if I can, there we go. No, I kind of lose my light that way. Oh yeah, zoom in to this. You can see really well because this already has kind of the iron bars across the lantern. That's what a satin stitch looks like. It's a little teeny tiny baby satin stitch, but it's just, I think I only did 4 straight stitches side by side by side. And it gives you just a nice, it's what I like to think a satin stitch is like coloring with floss. You know how if you're being careful to color in the lines of a coloring book, you use colored pencils or crayons and just kind of, you just side by side by side by side by side your strokes until it's filled in. That's exactly what a satin stitch is, just with floss. So there's that. So I'm going to quickly rethread. Oops, I dropped my thread and it'll get stuck on my body if I don't throw it away immediately. Okay. Does that ever happen to you? I have needles stuck in me in my clothes, not in me, in my clothes. I have done acupuncture though, very cool. But yeah, I get needles. I put them in I'll just stick them in my sleeves or in the knees of my pants. I'll just like, just to hold on to it. And then I forget they're there to my detriment later. Okay, so I'm going to pre-secure my floss. This is another little technique that I don't know if anybody else does it. I don't know if it's official, but I do it because sometimes it's nice to just have your floss tight and going nowhere from the start. So what I'll do when I'm starting a new length, if I've already done stitching, we've done plenty here on this portrait, I'll just run my needle through some of the backing stitching or stitching on the back just to get it nice and tight. It doesn't require a knot that way. It's just a series of looping around itself. And then I have full confidence that the tail's not going to pull through, especially because finishing this lantern, all I have are these long vertical stitches, and those would be a little bit harder to anchor than a cross stitch, which crosses kind of over itself and creates some nice shorter lengths of loops. So I'm just going to bring my needle up, follow the pattern, and do straight stitches all the way down. Now these are only 2 squares in height or length. So I'm just, instead of making 2 vertical straight stitches, one on top of the other, I'm just doing 1 straight stitch that is 2 lengths long, because I kind of want that look of long, you know, wrought iron, maybe kind of caging around this lantern. And then the flame comes through real nice, and it looks like it's a cool lantern, like on fire, ready to go. I love it. Cool. So I'm just going to tie my floss off, run the needle through some of the stitching on the back, and cut that short because it is totally secure. And we have done a lantern. So now we're going to jump into the greenery at the bottom. So I've got DMC 469 avocado green. I'm going to cut a I'm going to cut a biceps length worth of floss here. With embroidery stitches, sometimes I find you need more than you think you do, and yet I like working with lengths that are still manageable. So, so I do tend to stick with that forearm or bicep length. And with embroidery stitches, I may have mentioned this in previous classes, but I'll remind you, you can play with, well, at any point you can play with how many threads you use, but especially with embroidery stitches, if you find that you like to add greenery or you know, flowers or something, and you love like a thick, lush look or feel, try using 4 or 5 or even 6 strands of floss. Nothing stopping you. I really like the look of 3 threads on size 14 AIDA fabric for my cross stitching. So I tend to stick to 3 threads of size 14, or I'm sorry, 3 threads of floss on size 14 AIDA fabric for when I am doing embroidery stitches as well. So what I'm going to do is create these bushes or these little patches of greenery. There we go, outside the door, using lazy daisy stitches and also daisy chain stitches. So, or some people just call it the chain stitch. So first I'll start with a detached chain stitch, or it's also called the lazy daisy stitch. I'm going to pre-secure my floss, just like I've done in the past, where I'm going to run my needle through the stitching on the back a couple of times, just to make sure that as I start with my embroidery stitches, this floss ain't going nowhere. So there we go. Okay, now I'm gonna find on my portrait approximately where this greenery starts. It looks like it starts 1, 2.5 stitches to the left of my middle stair. So down here, I've got my middle stair, 1, 2.5 stitches. I'm going to poke right through. And this embroidery, some embroidery you trace directly onto your fabric and just follow it, just like exactly like a coloring book. When I combine embroidery with cross stitch, the majority of the pattern is a counted cross stitch pattern, just because that's what Stitch People does. We're a cross stitch company primarily. So our patterns are cross stitch patterns with a little bit of embroidery added. So you could trace the embroidery bits onto the back of the fabric lightly, or you can kind of eyeball it, which is actually what I encourage you to do because I think it's more fun. So what I'm going to do is, let me pull out a pencil and show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a detached chain stitch or lazy daisy stitch on the left and on the right, just to give myself a little bit of a foundation. And then I'm going to chain the stitches together and create a daisy chain the way that this is sort of illustrated going up and outward. So first, let me show you what a detached chain stitch or a lazy daisy stitch looks like. It's really simple, and it's such a great bang for your buck because it's just a simple thing to do that looks super effective. So you bring your needle up where you want the stitch to start. Pull your floss all the way through, and I can tell my floss is bunching ever so slightly. So before I get going, I'm just going to run my fingers along the length of it and prevent it from looping or, you know, catching like it is. Okay. So we pulled our needle up where we want the lazy daisy to start. There we go. Then you put your needle in the exact same hole, going the opposite direction. So I'm going to stick my needle in the exact same hole, but you want to pull slowly because you'll create a loop. And if you just look at it logically, if you pull too fast, you'll pull the whole loop right through, and then you'll have to start over because it's the same exact hole. But you'll see as you pull slowly that you're creating a loop. And that is essentially what's going to be your lazy daisy stitch. What you want to do before you pull this loop all the way through too far, and I'm just going to reference my pattern here. It looks like from the base, I'm going up-ish, 1, 2, 3 up, 1, 2.5 over, more or less. So I'm gonna count that just to make sure that I am getting the height that I want. So I'm going up 3 and over 2.5, but you could also eyeball it and just say, put your needle back through your fabric, the length from the starting point that you want your lazy daisy stitch to be, so that when you do continue to pull your loop through, it'll catch where you just brought up your needle, like this. And then you can play with the tension. You can pull it really tight and have a long, skinny leaf, essentially, is what we're making. Or I can stick my needle through there and get a little bit more slack back. And I can pull it so that it's a little bit wider. And then you create a tiny little tack stitch that's really only as wide as the thickness of your floss here. So I'm going to just put my needle right on the opposite side of that leaf and tack it in place. And there you have a lazy daisy stitch, or a detached chain stitch. I'm going to do the same thing to the right. So I bring my needle up where I want it to start. I put my needle back down. Oops, thank you. In the exact same hole. I pull slowly so that I don't pull that loop all the way through. But as that loop is forming, I'm going to try and mirror what I did on that other side. So let me just 1, 2, 3 up, 1, 2.5 over. And this does cross in front of the stairs a little bit, so that doesn't bother me. So I'm going to bring my needle up away from my loop that kind of indicates the length that I want this leaf to be. And it's twisting a little, so I'm going to untwist it so it lays nice and flat. And I want to catch that loop with my needle so that as I pull it tight, it does not pull through my fabric. Then I can play with the tension using my needle as a tool. There we go. Oh, that looks good. And then I just create a tiny little tack stitch to hold this puppy in place. Before that gets tight, I just want to make sure that it's centered. You want to shoot for that tack stitch being centered sort of at the very tippy top of your leaf.
Apex.
Yeah, the apex is a great, very scientifically accurate word for what I'm trying to say. Spencer is much better at those kinds of words than me. I use words like floopy a lot, which aren't real words, but they're surely evocative. Okay, so now we've created 2 detached chain stitches, or 2 lazy daisy stitches. That's the same thing. Now I'm going to create a chain stitch, which is exactly what we just did, but instead of creating tack stitches to hold the leaves, I'm going to refer to these as leaves because they're green. Instead of using tack stitch to hold the leaf down, what holds the leaf down is the base or the start of a new chain stitch, and you just chain them through each other, if that makes sense. So I'll show you what I mean. Starting here at the base, I'm not using the exact same hole as these guys are sharing here at the bottom because I want to start building some height. So I bring my needle up, pull the floss all the way through. I got a peek in there to make sure I can get my needle down through the exact same hole. You know,
Question for my own edification.
Sure.
Does it have to come back down through the same hole?
I guess theoretically not. It would just, depending on how far away from the original hole you put it in, would make kind of a different shape. But that would give you options for creating different curvatures of different shapes, you know? So that's an interesting question. Spencer Bean, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so now, just like before, I'm going to bring my needle up before I pull this loop through and have to start over. And I catch the loop with my needle and floss. And here I could just tack it. I could just do the tack stitch and that would be a detached stitch. Or I put my needle down through now this hole. And I create another loop in the chain. And I bring my needle up the distance away that I want the next portion of this little leaf or plant or fern or whatever it is we're making here. And I catch the loop. My floss is a little twisty, so I apologize if that's abstracting what's going on here. And if I was pleased with this length, I could stop here and tack this down. But for the sake of the exercise, I'm going to just put my needle right back through that hole and do one more length of this chain. Catch that loop with my needle. I did get all the threads, thank goodness. And now you can see I've got a 3-chain daisy chain or chain stitch. And this one is the one that I will tack. Before I do, I actually want to pull that a little tighter. I don't want it quite so chunky at the end. And then we tack it down. There you go. So this is what 1 looks like, and this is what 3 in a row look like. And you can create the entirety of these little bushes by using a combination thereof. And you can see these ones are smaller. They're just smaller little chains, chain stitches or lazy daisies, all chained together versus these bigger ones that kind of anchored at the bottom. You can play with the size, the tension. You can make long, skinny chain stitches or kind of squattier, rounder chain stitches. It is truly up to you and your preference and whatever it is that you would like to do, and how you would like it to look. I just unthreaded my needle, quite unfortunately. And this is a good opportunity. Sometimes this happens where, I don't know if you can see, yeah, you can see that. The ends of my floss are somehow uneven. And that just happens through tension and pulling and, you know, this, that, and the other. So if I'm rethreading my needle at this point, because I accidentally unthreaded it, I'm just going to cut these ends with my embroidery scissors into the tresh so that I get a nice blunt edge of all my threads. And that's a lot easier.
Denise said she could see filling in the leaves like a satin stitch too.
Absolutely, Denise. That is such a fun idea. In fact, why don't we do it now? So you can see what it would look like. Denise, 10 points for thinking outside the box and for chiming in. I love when people chime in. I find the best things happen as a result of collaboration. Okay, now you're all watching me. I can't thread my needle. That always happens. I can get it on the first try like every other day of my life, but start a live Zoom class, no more. Okay, so I just created a chain stitch, and I was trying to get into my second part of it and unthreaded my needle. So now I'm just going to create the second portion of the chain. And before that loop pulls through, I'm going to bring my needle up, catch the loop if it'll let me. Just go slow and steady. Sometimes things get a little twisty. Sometimes it gets a little confusing. Don't worry about it. Just go slow and steady, and you'll figure out what's happening with the chains and the loops. It's a lot going on. And I'm going to do, just to mirror the one on the left side, I'm going to do one more loop and chain here and tack it down. Whip. There we go. You can kind of see that gold lock from the door poking through. So sometimes what Denise mentioned was, hey, you could fill those leaves in with a satin stitch to make it look more like a succulent. You totally could. And sometimes what I like to do, if you have any other embroidery floss laying around, you could swap it out for like a lighter green or darker green. Sometimes what I'll do is just one straight stitch like this in the center of my lazy daisies. And that just sort of fills it out. It gives it a little bit more dimension. Or like Denise said, you could satin stitch the inside, which again is just like a coloring book. And all I'm doing is side by side by side straight stitches in the leafy shape that I created. And I just wanted to show you what Denise's idea would look like in actuality, because we can do whatever the heck we want in our class. And I say creative collaboration wins out. So that's what a satin stitch would look like to fill that in versus the openness of the other side. But now I'm going to satin stitch this side because I think it's pretty. And this leaf on the right side is a little skinnier, so it doesn't need as many straight stitches to fill it in. But there you have it. There you have it, folks. So I'm just going to fill out this bush a little bit. I'm going to do a singular detached chain stitch over here. Just this is just my own personal decision making of how to fill this out, kind of loosely based on this, but also these are a little bit smaller chains than I did in the initial pattern and stitched example, and I don't mind it even one bit. I kind of like the idea of mixing larger and smaller, so I'm going to do another chain stitch or a detached chain stitch. Laissez daisy. Tack that in. And maybe do a little one kind of sprouting out here over to the side.
This could be a great time to talk about our upcoming book.
Oh yeah, I was going to mention, somebody asked if Leighton asked if we were doing the Pinners Conference. One of the things we are doing that isn't the Pinners Conference, but we're about to do the Needlework Expo. It's a really fun conference that you all may not be aware. It's this really fun thing where cross-stitch stores, knitting stores, embroidery stores that are around, there's a big conference of cross-stitch designers and pattern makers. We all get together and kind of show the stores what we've all been up to, and they can, buy our patterns, buy our books, and provide them for sale in their stores. So that starts, you might see us mentioning that on our Instagram. That's why I brought it up. That's what it is. It's a business to business conference, as they say. And that's coming up. I think it starts on Saturday this week. And one of the things we're so excited about for that conference is our latest book. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, like I mentioned, Stitch People, we focus on cross-stitched family portraits, totally do-it-yourself, customizable, personalized, like you mix and match patterns for your own family and loved ones, or for your favorite literary characters like we've done today. And as a result, people not only come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and colors, but professions as well. Do you want to stitch your dad in his Sunday best, or in his like casual football clothes, or like in a doctor's scrubs? You got to have patterns for all of those. And so we have patterns of farm animals and backgrounds and all sorts of things that, all sorts of different people with different backgrounds might need for their portraits. And our latest, there's a trend in kind of the Stitch People community of adding really beautiful floral motifs to the bottoms or tops or sides of portraits. So we're putting out a book specific to that called Floral Motifs, with 28 different floral motif patterns that you can use on your portraits. They're usually just a little arc, like a semicircle like this at the bottom of your portrait that's filled with things like lazy daisy stitches like we just did. I'm going to zoom out and see if that helps the lighting at all here on this pattern. So you can see our satin stitch. You can see we've just created a very free form looking bush here. I also want to point out, if this is tricky for you or frustrating for you, or you just don't like this stitch for some reason, which no judgment, I don't know, but that could be your thing. Straight stitches would also work. If you took your green floss and created stitches just like you did for the archway or the stairs, it would be kind of a more grassy look, a little bit more spiky, but would totally provide the greenery that you might want to have on either side of the door. So feel free to, like, if you come across a stitch like, ugh, I really stink at that stitch, I don't like doing it, then don't. Do something you do like, change it up. Before I launch into this other bush on the other side, one thing I'm going to do to mix it up here and show you more possibilities is I'm going to add some little white budding flowers to our left side bush. And I did this funky, so my skein is all mad at me. There we go. So I'm just going to get a length of white floss. I'm going to separate it into 3 strands. And we talked about French knots when we did Sherlock Holmes pipe, but I want to show you a trick, especially as we are talking about the special embroidery stitches. The French knot can be manipulated to your specific needs. And I encourage you to try it because it's a lot of fun. So what I'm going to do is pre-secure my white floss on the back side of the portrait, like I've talked about that I like to do. Just going to loop it through some of the existing floss so that I can start my French knots with a nice tension, pre-existing tension. I don't have to hold anything with my thumb or my left hand or get all worried about what's happening. It's just ready to go. So we've pre-secured. It is nice and tight, as you can see. So I'll review my method for a typical French knot. Typically, where should we put one? How about right here? So typically a French knot consists of, thank you, Spencer. He's zooming in for me. That's a little tough to see because I have white coming through. So I'm actually just going to put a little bud right in the middle of the satin stitching here at the base of my flower. You'll see once the white thread pulls through. So when you are doing a French knot, you pull your needle through from back to front all the way. Hold your floss with your left hand. Wrap it twice around your needle and put the tip of your needle very, very close to where you brought it up in the first place. You want to catch a thread of floss or of the AIDA fabric because you don't want that French knot to pull through the fabric just because it uses the same hole. That's what we were worried about with the lazy daisy stitch, is if you pull that loop too fast, since you're using the same hole, it'll just pull right through to the back. Anyway, as you pull your French knot tight, I like to keep my left finger in that loop. Once it gets to be no longer viable, I remove it and I just pull that loop tight. Then you've got yourself a very traditional small, tight French knot. Looks really cute. We're just going to make some buds here. What you can do though, which is really super fun, is wrap the needle 3 times or 4 times and not pull super, super tight as you make the knot so that it kind of keeps the knot loose and wide. And you'll get some nice kind of bud or flower shapes from this. I'll show you what I mean. So over here, I would like to create more of a open flower. This almost looks like it could be little peonies or something because they're super, super round spheres when they're not open. But when they open, they're just so lush. So you bring your needle all the way forward from back to front. Now I'm going to wrap my needle. Let's do 4 times just for the sake of the exercise. So I'm going to wrap my needle 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And I'm going to leave it a little bit loose. Instead of pulling everything super tight like this, I'm just going to let it have some slack. And I'm going to put my needle very, very close to where I brought it up, catching a thread or 2. And I'm going to allow it. You can already see it's a little bit looser there. Trust what you've done because it looks like a real mess right now. Trust it. And I'm going to play with the tension ever so slightly as I pull this through. So instead of really forcing my left finger to hold that loop steady, I'm just going to play. You can see the tension is loose. And I'm going to pull it tight around itself in that loose manner. And voila, I've got a little loop. Now it's sticking up. You can kind of see it's a very 3D loop right now. So just like I did with the lazy daisy stitches, I'm going to tack it. So I'm going to bring my needle right back up through the center of this loop of French knots. And I'm just going to tack down the edge. Let's see. Tiny little, the stitch is just the width, essentially of the floss itself. And we tack it down in place. And now we have more of a little rose-like or open flower situation. And that's a French knot. Like, holy cats, these two are the exact same, the same stitch. Only one's pulled really tightly here on the left and only wrapped around my needle 2 times. And this one over here was wrapped loosely around my needle 4 times. You see what I mean? You can be real sneaky and you can manipulate these stitches into whatever your heart desires. So up here, I'm going to do a 3 twist. So I'm going to go 1, a 2, a 3. If you know that reference.
Crunch.
Crunch. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? See, there's another one of those references. Anytime I count to 3, I always think of that freaking owl. 1, a 2, 3, crunch. Which does not work, by the way. Do not recommend crunching a Tootsie Pop after the 3rd lick. Tried it, no good. So I wrap my needle 3 times on this French knot, and I do have, you see, my left finger through the loop because I want to create sort of a medium. I've got a really tight, small French knot. I've got a really big, wide French knot. I just want to create a little medium-sized one, medium tension. And this one just naturally lays a little more flat than the huge one. So I don't think I need to tack it, but hey, look, it's like a little halfway open bud there in my greenery. So for the fun of it, I'm going to scatter a couple more budded French knots, just tight little ones around as though this were a, oh, I don't know, peonies, gardenia, something like that. Just to fill out this bush. And maybe one more over here. Spence, do we have any questions that need answering?
Someone did ask what a Tootsie Pop is, so I'm sending her links.
Tootsie Pop. I don't know if you know what a Tootsie Roll is. I'll start there. Tootsie Roll. Very waxy, poor excuse for chocolate. It's like a Laffy Taffy or a Starburst, but chocolate flavored. Not as gross as it sounds. Actually kind of satisfying. They come in a variety of shapes and sizes. And a Tootsie Pop is a lollipop that has that form of candy, that chocolate, chewy chocolate. It's like taffy chocolate at the center. And the flavors of the hard shell candy around the lollipop are quite satisfying, in my opinion. Orange or, oh, dropped a needle. Alert, alert. Don't want my feet on that. So we've got 13 minutes to try and complete the greenery on the other side of the door.
A couple thoughts.
Yes.
I'll mute myself.
Robin said, could you make a carnation on either Watson or Sherlock or something like that?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. And you've also got red floss you could use from that you've used on Sherlock's plaid hat or Watson's vest. So you could totally, oh, you could also add red flowers to the bush if you wanted to, because we've got red lying around, or orange, little orange buds, or pink from the lips. Go nuts. Yeah, absolutely add a little boutonniere. That's a great idea.
And then here's a random.
Or in the hat. Ooh, a little flower in the hat. Like just a little extra. I love it. Sorry, what was
another random question. Another random question. Do you ever use a needle minder?
Do I ever use a needle minder?
Well, first explain what it is.
So a needle minder, I can show you one. I happen to have one right here. But don't be deceived by the fact that I have one, because I don't usually use one, but I've been exploring them. So this is an example of a pretty oyster as a needle minder. Usually what it is some kind of enamel pin, like this pretty oyster shape, and a magnet. And what you do is you stick your, you magnet it to your fabric so it stays on like this. And then when you're like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom, or oh, I want to get a drink, you just put your needle on there and your needle does not fall out onto the floor like mine just did. So it'd probably be to my benefit to use needle minders. I've not really gotten into using them because as they become more and more popular, it's been around the time that I've gotten more and more into needing to do more of the business stuff on Stitch People. So I'm actually not stitching as much as I used to. So it's just not on my mind as much. But we are working on Stitch People needle minders right now, Stitch People related designs. So because we know a lot of people do use them and do like them, we want you to have everything your heart desires, truly. That would just be my wish for the world, that everybody can have all of the good and true things that they want. Okay, so we've made a loop. Gonna tack it down, and tack it downtown. There we go. Sometimes I sing. Sorry. Spencer's just over here laughing like he gets a lot more of it than just that. Okay, let's bring my needle up. I'm gonna make a loop.
Everyone else wishes they could be so lucky as I am.
Oh,
to get all of the singing.
It's I don't know if anybody out there's watched the show Parks and Rec. There's a character, Parks and Recreation. There's a character named Jean Ralphio, and he sings a lot of what other people would just speak. And I felt very seen as a person, very validated. I was like, it's not just me. Unfortunately, he's not like a great guy. He's not a bad guy. He's just like flighty and irresponsible, but he sings all the time. And it just, oh, it kills me. Okay, so now I'm going to do some chain stitching like I did on the other side. Fly like the wind, bullseye. I would love to finish this pattern before I have to be like, bye everybody. We only have like 2 stitches left, but we don't have enough time to do them because I spent too much time talking and singing. Like that would be the worst. I could do it. I could do it. I swear I'm going to do it. Okay. Pulled that 1 stitch a little more than I wanted to. There we go. Gonna tack it down.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys can hear that. We just had a
Sure can.
fire truck go by. I hope everything's okay. We have been in Fireville, USA, and that is inaccurate. I mean, we're not the only ones on fire right now. Stay safe, everybody. Just stay safe. Don't start fires, and stay safe. It's been bad. We've had all the smoke from, where is it, California, Oregon, everywhere. And
Plus our
own
fires.
It's been smoky. And in where we live in a valley, so there's mountains all over. And so the smoke kind of gets trapped because it can't get up and over the mountains. So there was a couple days there where like, usually you wake up and look out the window and you can see giant mountains outside your door, and like could have been flat for all you could see. Just nothing, just smoke. It was crazy. It's cleared up a bit. We had some good rain and that helped. It's such boring small talk, everybody. I'm so sorry. Let me tell you about my local weather patterns, because that's interesting and pertinent. No. See, now we're into the part where you all know what I'm doing. I'm just looking at this bush, filling in stitches where they gots to go. Ta-da. I'm gonna pull that tight because I could see some bunching of my floss that I'll deal with in a second. So I pulled it tight and then was re-loosening it so my stitches are a little more uniform. Do one more in that chain. Tack that up there. And then balance that out. Perfection. And I'm going to do another big stitch over here. That might just do it, and then I can do some more French knots, and then we can be done and celebrate and have an internet dance party in our chairs. Because if I got up, you wouldn't be able to see me anymore, and I wouldn't be able to see you. That would be sad. Gonna do a tack stitch. There, is that, I want one down here. Again, this is just me eyeballing it. If you think it looked great and you wanted to stop where you're at, do it. I'm gonna do 1 chain of 2 stitches over here on the outside. Oh, or do I just like the 1? I just like the 1. I thought I was gonna have to do 2 to fill it out the way I wanted to, but I didn't.
A couple questions.
Quest them. I love questions.
We'll start with Linda's question.
Okay.
Do you use 3 threads for house numbers and lips and et cetera, the 3 threads for those details, or do you use 2?
Good question. It depends. I generally use 3 strands of floss for all cross stitching and embroidery, as mentioned. I also use 3 strands for, all these straight stitches all around here. For little details, I like to use either 1 or 2 threads, depending on how little the detail is. Now, for the, it looks like I might have only used 1 thread up at the 221B Baker Street, but the trick is I actually used 2. And it unfortunately is something that you learn the more you stitch. The reason I use 2 threads for the lettering and numbering up in the window is because I was putting it on top of a fully cross-stitched area. That whole basically rectangle or archway of a window was fully cross-stitched. So when I do straight stitches that fall in between existing cross stitches, they can kind of sink down in there. And so 1 thread would have really sunken in and it would have been a little hard to read. 2 threads gives it just enough mass that it doesn't get so squished and pulled in. So that's why I used 2. I generally use 1 thread for like shirt details, things like that. Lips, I'll usually use 3 because of that same effect as the lettering. Since I'm putting it on a fully cross-stitched face, and I'm putting it between, you know, from AIDA hole in the fabric to another hole in the AIDA fabric, since it'll lay between the cross stitches and get pulled in a little bit. So you don't want to lose that. So I'll usually use 3 for the mouth. So now, because I have 5 whole minutes, this is going to be great. We're going to finish it together with extra French knot stitches, you guys. I was so hoping we could have time for it. How we did.
I'll answer Cynthia's question real quick.
Oh, I'm excited.
Do an open looking plant over her pup on the left side.
Absolutely. That sounds great. Yeah, in the pattern and in the original, so I stitched this pattern already kind of to test it and to take some photos of it so we could have it for showing you all what you'd be stitching. I did way more open greenery in that than I did on this version, just to show you some skills. So I'm starting with a looser French knot, and I've gotten stuck on my own fabric there in the corner. I'm just gonna wrestle it out. But yeah, I love all these ideas. Absolutely. Do something more open. And did you say something about a pup?
Yeah.
Like stitching a little dog?
I think so.
I love it. Yes. We have 3 doggies. So
Another question from Kathy. Do you use straight stitches over several squares for steps and lines above, or a series of back stitches?
that is personal preference, and you can do either. On this particular pattern, I wanted the steps to look broad, and I wanted the archway to look kind of wide. So I just did in this hole, out that hole, in this hole, out that hole, just big, long, you know, one strand, one big, long, straight stitch. You are more than welcome to do back stitching, like in and out and in and out and in and out along the holes of the fabric. That is absolutely an option. And if you would rather do that, I'd be interested to see what it looks like. So tag us on your final posts, you know, post a picture so we can see. But that's just truly personal preference. If you think it looks a little too broad or maybe even a little sloppy the way I've done it, I take no offense. And I think you should absolutely do it back stitching if you feel that would suit your aesthetic more. But I like that you asked the question because it can truly be done either way. And that's what I love about cross stitching and embroidery. It is so much like coloring to me, where you pick your own crayons and you pick your own colored pencils, and yes, you're filling in the lines and you're kind of following a guide, but you can play with shading and color mixing and all sorts of things. There, I just tacked that down, and it didn't tack the way I expected, but I don't hate it. It's kind of an open, fun shape. Yeah, embroidery is like grown-up coloring, except I have to admit, I went on a camping trip a couple days ago with some friends. We didn't have any cell service. It was amazing. It's been a long time since we've been completely out of service. Just like we didn't have the option. We had to drive 14 miles if we wanted to have the option. And my friend brought her huge box of, she has like an art kit of colored, like really good colored pencils and some coloring pages. And I enjoyed it thoroughly. So coloring is for grown-ups too.
Now, one thing before we do finish,
yeah,
I just want to get this question in here. Sally's asking, once you're done, how would you finish it?
That's a great question. And I'm going to create my last little French knot here. I tied it 3 times. It's going to be a little bit of a looser one, but not too. There we go. And I'm going to tie off. This is the last step. You just run your needle across the back. Ta-da. And now you're like, hooray, my beautiful finished work. Now what? That's a really great question. You have a number of options available to you. A lot of people like to frame their work in their hoop. Now, if you use your hoop upside down like I do, which again has to do with just dirt, oil, lotion, whatever on your fingers, that when you hold it upside down, your thumb and anything that might be on that is only going to get on the outer edges of the front, but everything else is going to be on the back side. That's why I use an upside down hoop. You could put your work right side up in the hoop and tuck, basically what you can do is there are a lot of methods for tucking in the edges around like this, such that when your work is right side up in the hoop, you know, it sits really pretty like this, and then you can just, you know, hang it on a nail just right here at the top. You can also take your work out and stick it in a traditional frame with glass and a mat if you'd like. If it's something really elaborate that you want to frame really nicely, you take it to a framer. They do have options where they can put like foam spacers between the back and the matting so that any 3D effects like your embroidery and your flowers aren't going to get squished against the glass. The mat is going to hold the glass up above the work, so it's protected by glass. And sometimes you can get that glass that protects it from sunlight even, but that the spacers between the mat and the back of the frame keep it up above from squishing this fabric. There's also a great brand called Auburn hoops that actually, Spence, will you hand me one? There's wooden Auburn hoops in the base there. They're wooden hoops. It's a really great brand. I have a couple on hand just to use that does wooden hoops. And you take out this, they're a little tricky to use. They're quite tight, but pulling this leather strap, you take out this inner white part, lay in your fabric and frame it up. It's a lot like a traditional embroidery hoop, the way you frame it, but it is wood and it looks really, really nice, very classy. You could also, oh gosh, you could turn it into a pillow. If you have enough fabric, sometimes people will, you know, fold down the edges here, sew a backing on it into a pocket and stuff it. You can make it into a little pillow. But I think the most common method is to just frame it in your hoop like this. And you can leave the back open and raw or not. And I wish I had more time to talk you through that. I would just Google like finishing an embroidery thing, or, you know, framing options for cross stitching. And you'll see a lot of really great tutorials that show you kind of how to scrunch this fabric in, how to put other fabric on top if you want it to look a little nicer. Some people, like, what I like to do is get felt. It's really cheap, just, you know, sheets of felt at a craft store, and trace my hoop, and I can just sort of lightly tack felt onto the back, and that just sort of covers the back up really nicely, protects the stitching. So you have a lot of options, and Google's going to be your best friend there. And I will say that Michaels has a lot of options as far as like hoop sizes. Michaels, I go to Michaels for my framing anyway. They have tons of frames pre-bought you can do, or take it to like the framing department at a Michaels, and they can help you with that matting option to not squish your work under the glass. So those are some options, and I'd love to see how you all decide to keep and frame these. But feel free to do what you'd like. If you want to add words, I've seen a couple people add like elementary or something underneath there. So fun, so cool. I know we're a couple minutes over, so I'll wrap up really quick. I just want to thank you all so much for coming and doing this this project with us. It is such a pleasure to share this craft, to share cross stitching. I know all of you probably have a sense for how calming and fulfilling and even meditative and centering it can be to make something with your hands and to have something to show for it that Spencer just tripped on a cord. It's so fun, and it's so fulfilling, and it's so nice. And I hope you enjoyed it, especially for those of you who are newbies, who are beginners. I hope you enjoyed learning. And if you have any questions, come on over to Stitch People, info@stitchpeople.com. We can help you finish up your portraits and your patterns. And again, all of the DMC products that we use here today, you can get at michaels.com or in your Michaels stores, and kind of everything's like ready, one and done there for you. So jump into cross stitching, see what else you can make. Possibilities are endless. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I'm sad to say goodbye, but it has been a true pleasure. And we hope to see you around, interacting with us on Stitch People on Instagram or on Facebook and the like. And we'll see you soon. Oh, Spencer's raising his hand.
Email about the review.
Oh, there's going to be an email sent to you to review this class. We'd love for you to fill that out. That is so helpful to us to know how we can do better. You know, we've talked to Michaels about it. We have it, and we get all that feedback. It's really, really helpful. So if you leave us a review and fill that out in the email, just keep an eye out. That'd be super helpful. Thank you. And Sherlock Holmes and John Watson, thank you as well. Thank you so much for coming to our class, everyone. And till next time, we'll see you around the internet. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.